Hello, and welcome everyone to the October 25th, 2016 regular meeting for the Brookhaven City Council, starting at 7 p.m., starting at 7:04. Welcome to see so many good, happy faces here today, and very familiar faces. We'll start with the invocation, and at this time, while everyone will pray in your own silence, please give some extra to our former Mayor Rebecca Chase Williams, who's going through a health scare right now, and it's, I would say, level on a very serious level. So if you could throw some good thoughts her way. So at this moment of silence. Call the roll.
Mayor John Ernst, Jr.
I'm here.
Councilmember Lindley Jones, District 1.
Present.
Councilmember John Park, District 2.
Here.
Councilmember Bates Madison, District 3.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Gebbia, District 4.
Here.
Have our quorum.
Pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Anne Marie, pet of the day.
Okay. That's Morticia. She's a sweet, laid-back lady who loves affection and does great with other cats. So do yourself a treat and fill out an application for her today. And she is from Lifeline Animal Project. They're currently offering a Fall in Love special where all dogs over 25 pounds and all cats are half off the adoption fee, and that includes examinations, vaccinations, spaying, neutering, and microchipping. So you can see Morticia and more like her at www.lifelineanimal.org.
Was that a Halloween special name, I would assume?
It is.
Okay. Going right into public hearings. We'll start with the city budget public, which I'm sure everyone's here for.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll just give a brief presentation. Won't be as extensive as the actual rollout from 2 weeks ago. But for our viewing audience, 2 weeks ago I introduced the 2017 proposed budget in the amount of $37 million. Key to that, for the public consumption, is there are targeted investments in the Parks Master Plan at $2.5 million, dedicated funding for street reconstruction and street paving, $4 million, $300,000 for additional sidewalk construction, and funding in the Stormwater Fund for the first year of the Nancy Creek Watershed Improvement Program. Operationally, the budget recommends a traffic unit, a dedicated enforcement unit, a development services manager to improve our ability to get permits through and coordinated with cross-city departments and utilities, a right-of-way coordinator for a similar purpose. And then there are strategic management investments. For a young city in this particular budget, we establish a vehicle replacement fund and an information technology replacement fund. And we maintain with this budget a 25% fund balance, which is the council policy. So with that, it's just a truncated version here. If there are any questions, I will entertain them.
Any questions on council? Seeing none, we'll move up to open public hearing. Susan, do we have any people who talked about?
I do not have any cards turned in, and before we go into any other public hearings, I'd like to remind everyone of the rules at that time. But at this time, we have no comments about the budget.
And I might as well remind everyone about maybe next public hearing that, you need to turn them in comment cards to come to.
Yes. And the next one is November the 9th.
Okay. Does anyone want to speak about the budget? Opposition, support, hearing none, I'm closing public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, before you go on to the next one, I would like to say that people can still provide comment via the website. And it's 2017 budget comments at brookhavenga.gov, 2017 budget comments at brookhavenga.gov. We have the budget posted on our website. We, as of this morning, have had 132 unique hits on that, so we know at least 132 folks have clicked on the budget, and we do have hard copies available through the clerk or my office upon request. Thank you.
Christian, you mind reminding people when the third public hearing is, and then when we were scheduled to adopt it?
There isn't a third public, there's a second one on the 9th.
All right.
And we're adopting on the 9th, the Wednesday, the day after the election.
Okay. Seeing that, coming to public hearing RZ 16-08 MARTA TOD. So,
Can I remind
Yep.
everyone of the rules? Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
Just want to remind everyone that we're going to hear this one concurrently, and so there'll be 20 minutes for opposition, 20 minutes support, 20 minutes for the applicant. And also, please remember our decorum rules. We appreciate it if you do not do clapping and making comments after each speaker. Also, remember that the council cannot get into a dialogue between you and your questions until after the public hearing is closed. Thank you.
okay. With that, we are taking them concurrently. The summary by city manager and staff.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, it's going to be heard concurrently, the RZ 1608 as well as SLUP 1602, which are related cases. The request is from the applicant Brookhaven City Center Partners, LLC, is to rezone what is familiarly known as the MARTA property, which is zoned currently MC2, RM75, and R75 to PC2. The property is located in the 18th District, land lots 238 and 239. It's comprised of 17.76 acres. Essentially, the rezone again is from MC2, RM75, and R75 to PC2 for a mixed-use development consisting of 447 multifamily residential units, 100 senior housing units, 55,768 square feet of retail and restaurant uses, 200,000 square feet of office, and 125-room, 75,000 square foot hotel. The special land use permit is a request to increase the height of the office building from 100 feet to 125 feet. Staff did recommend approval with 35 conditions. The Planning Commission recommended approval for RZ 1608 with modified conditions, while they recommended denial of SLUP 1602. There were many changes that were, or modifications that took place with the conditions. The modification, for the most part, was related to, and it's included in your packet page 184 through 188. A lot of the references related to the SLUP were removed by the Planning Commission based upon their recommended denial of the SLUP. There is one key aspect that I wanted to mention from the Planning Commission, in which there's addition of condition number 36, which relates to the open space calculation. The open space calculation condition states, open space shall be developed in accordance with Exhibit 2. Exhibit 2 would be shown at a later time. Essentially, what it states is that the open space calculation will be primarily based upon the open space that's been presented for the primary site, excluding the Fernwood detention property. Thank you.
Okay, this one.
All right.
Addie?
Good evening, Mayor Ernst, members of the council. My name is Jessica Hill. My address is 3343 Peachtree Road. I'm with the firm of Morris, Manning & Martin, and I'm here representing the applicant. Got an aerial up here. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the property, an aerial view of the site. It's over 17 acres. It has the MARTA parking on the front on Peachtree, the MARTA station and the rail lines in the middle, a large
I'm
parking.
sorry, Ms. Hill, excuse me for interrupting. Mayor, let me remind you, please, to officially open the public hearing before we get further down this road.
Public hearing opened.
Thank you.
I'll pretend it was open.
Yeah.
MARTA parking on the other side of the station, and then the area that's referred to as Fernwood Park, which is on what looks like the right side of Apple Valley Road. It's about a 2.5 acre parcel. We do have a zoning request and a SLUP request before you. The SLUP is limited to the office building, which will be at the corner of Peachtree and Dresden. Where to start? This project has been over 10 years in the making. I'm showing you the LCI plan, which you can see on the right side of the LCI plan, the development It proposed commercial uses along Peachtree. It had an office building at the corner of Dresden and Apple Valley with retail on the bottom. It's actually 2 office buildings. And then a park, and then residential as you extend down Apple Valley toward North Druid Hills. MARTA took several years to actually implement a development on this site. In 2013, they held a charrette to get some design ideas. They selected a development partner. Citizen Review Board was formed, had several meetings with the community to solicit input earlier this year, back in February, and showed this initial plan. This was the first plan that was shown. It has a parking deck on Peachtree. It had 2 office buildings on Peachtree totaling 318,000 square feet. It had 680 residential units and had just over 41,000 square feet of retail. Before we submitted the application, we took feedback from the community. This is a chart which I'm happy to go back to if anybody wants to review it in detail. But basically, we increased the retail, added a hotel, reduced the office, added a for sale component, and reduced the apartments, and overall reduced the residential use. This is the current plan. Starting at the bottom left in purple, you'll see what is a 125-room hotel, which is accessed off of Peachtree. Moving upward on Peachtree, you've got a transit plaza, which is about 22,000 square feet. The building that is pink is the only office building proposed, and that is also the one that is the subject of the SLUP. It is 200,000 square feet, 8 stories, 125 feet. As you extend down Dresden, across the tracks and across the MARTA station, you have in gray the parking deck, which will serve the office building as well as that residential and retail building. The portion that you see in orange attached to that building is residential. That's 3 stories on Dresden, 5 on Apple Valley, and then the area that you see in yellow has a retail component, so that is 6 stories. And that's 6 stories facing into the plaza, the town green that you see there. The development on either side of the town green is 6 stories, which is allowed as of right per the overlay. What you see in red is a food court, retail. It's about 12,000 square feet. It is a 2-story building intended to screen the Plaza Park area from Apple Valley. Then as you extend down on Apple Valley Road, the building in blue is our senior housing component. That is about 100 units. And then the bottom, as you see in the kind of greenish gray color, that is the for sale component. The senior housing is 4 stories, and the for sale component is 5 and 3 stories when you get to North Druid Hills. The MARTA parking will be in the parking deck that you see next to the for sale, and that is the other parking is self-parked. We've had several questions about Fernwood Park along this process. We were asked at an early phase to include the 2.5-acre parcel. It does currently provide the stormwater detention for the site. It has since before Apple Valley was in existence. And so we are looking at this as a 17.75-acre tract. Let's see. Here's some views around the site. This is the view from Apple Valley looking into the park. You can see the food hall in the center, and then you have the 2 residential buildings over retail that lines the park. This is a close-up of the park. We've been asked for dimensions on the park. One of the requirements of the SLUP is that we have to provide at least a 42,000 square foot area along Apple Valley, and this park meets that requirement. That's one of the key components as to why it is sized in this manner. Here is another close-up of the food hall. As you can see, it's 2-story. There is a zoning condition relative to some sound and noise conditions related to that. This is a view on Apple Valley near the intersection of North Druid Hills. This is the 3-story for sale component. Oh, I'm not moving. There we go. This is a view from Peachtree looking toward Dresden. That's the office building that you see in the Transit Plaza, and then on the right is the hotel. A close-up of the Transit Plaza. And the zoning map. The reason why we're here, the property along Peachtree is zone C2, that's the red. The property along North Druid Hills and Apple Valley in gray, that's zoned industrial. And then the yellowish color is R75, and the green color on the corner of Apple Valley and Dresden is the RM75. The reason that we are here is because the portions that are zoned residential, the ones that are yellow and green on the map, have a unit per acre cap associated with them. There are no zoning conditions on this property, unlike some of the applications that you have seen. So that area limits the residential density. Now, it doesn't limit the office density or the retail density. It doesn't limit commercial density. We have chosen to orient the residential uses along the eastern portion of the site toward the more single-family residences as you head towards Apple Valley and more into the neighborhood. But doing so means we have to go through a rezoning. This is an elevation of the office building. We were asked to submit 2 elevations, and I'm going to click to the next one. This is the desired office building. It is not allowed by the overlay provision, which says that you have to have predominantly masonry or brick facade. So we were asked to submit a facade that met the overlay requirements. The applicant does intend to go through the variance process, through the public hearing process to achieve this facade, the glass and brick or the glass facade. But that would obviously be a separate process. The SLUP that we've requested is to allow this building, again, to be 8 stories, 125 feet. As of right, we're allowed 8 stories, 100 feet. We have met several very specific requirements in the overlay to achieve this height. And I just want to make that very clear because the project design has all of these components incorporated into it. Number one, the building has to be within 800 feet of the station fare gates. It can't be any closer than 200 feet to single family. It can't exceed 125 feet. We have to provide 25% publicly accessible open space. Otherwise, we'd only be required to provide 20. We have to provide at least a 10,000 square foot contiguous open space on Peachtree, which we're providing in the Transit Plaza, actually providing double that. Without that, the publicly accessible open space does not have to be contiguous. Similarly, on Apple Valley, we're required to provide at least a 40,000 square foot contiguous open space, which is accomplished by the town green. And we have to provide 2 of the following, either 20% workforce housing, 40,000 square feet first floor retail, or a community space, and we're meeting the first 2 components. So we have met the design criteria to achieve this special land use permit. If it is not approved as recommended by the Planning Commission, then the 20% publicly accessible open space is not required to be contiguous, no requirements for the town green or the plaza. Let's see. This is a phasing plan that we were asked to submit. There were a lot of questions about what's going to go first and when. As you can see, the numbers 1 are the town green, the office building, the residential, and the improvements to what we're calling Fernwood Park. Number 2 is the hotel, which we anticipate 2 and 3 hopefully will go together. Phase 3 is the senior housing component, which has some timing issues relative to the funding for it. It is going to receive, or we're going to apply for, federal low-income housing tax credits, which are only awarded once a year, and then the development is required to be constructed with CO by a certain time. And I say that because it's important to some provisions we have to the conditions. This is just the open space plan that was mentioned. This is the area that we were including initially as our publicly accessible open space, which we achieve and exceed the 25%. And this is the plan that is referenced in the Planning Commission recommendations, which excludes the Fernwood Park and the MARTA station from the development. We are amenable to this plan being a condition, but again, only if we are granted the SLUP. With regard to the Planning Commission conditions, we are amenable to all with 4 revisions. Conditions 3 and 4 were adjusted from the staff's conditions because they did not grant the SLUP. And so we would ask that those be replaced with the staff's conditions. Conditions 15 and 16 relate to the timing of the traffic improvements, which again, going back to this phasing diagram, pretty much the phasing of the traffic improvements, which I'm going to let Rob get to in just a second, require that the improvements on the Dresden side of the project have to be completed within phase 1. And we had asked that the improvements on the southern portion at North Druid Hills be completed at the later of phase 2 or phase 3. The Planning Commission suggested that should be the earlier of phase 2 or phase 3. We would prefer for it to be the later, or at least at a minimum tie it only to phase 2, again, given the funding consideration and timing consideration on phase 3. And then again, as I mentioned, condition number 36, which addresses this plan, is only appropriate to the extent that we are granted the SLUP. Otherwise, we need to discuss that language. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rob before I talk too much.
Thanks, Jessica. Rob Ross with Kinley Horn Associates, 817 West Peachtree Street, Suite 601, Atlanta, Georgia. I'll talk a little bit about the traffic study. Traffic obviously has been a big topic of discussion as part of this project. We went through a very thorough public input process, met with the neighbors and neighborhoods a number of times. I have to say it's the most rigorous public input that I've gone through on any development project, especially before even preparing the traffic study. We heard a lot from the neighbors, and we know and understand that traffic's a concern, and we know why. In that, we went through a DRI process, a development of regional impact. It's basically a regional traffic study that's required by the state for projects of a certain size. It includes a number of different jurisdictions, including the city, the state DOT, Georgia Regional Transportation Authority, Atlanta Regional Commission, MARTA, City of Atlanta was invited, Chamblee came, and DeKalb County was there as well. Prepared the analysis, all those folks reviewed the study and ended up with conditions. The findings of the study, we studied 3 different time frames. We go do traffic counts on the roads, and we study what's happening out on the roadway network today, so existing conditions. We project that traffic out to the future build-out year of this project, and study that future year without the proposed development. And then we add the development traffic on top of that. What we found was that in existing conditions, Peachtree, the intersection of Peachtree and Dresden fails. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody in the room. And the future no build, we found still Peachtree at Dresden still fails, and Peachtree at North Druid Hills will fail in the future. It's pretty bad now, but it's going to be even worse in the future, and it's going to reach failing conditions. We identified improvements that could be completed to address all of those failing conditions, and that with those improvements, these intersections will meet the standard even with the traffic from this proposed development. This is a very small figure that shows what the conditions Greta, the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority, put on the property. They basically conditioned that the southbound left turn lane needed to be constructed on North Druid Hills, and a westbound right turn lane on Dresden at Peachtree. However, we've been working with the city and the state to advance every improvement identified in the traffic study. So the state's DRI process conditioned some improvements. We're advancing all of the improvements that were identified in the study. This exhibit shows a concept of what we're proposing at North Druid Hills and Peachtree that shows how a second left turn lane could be constructed by retasking some existing pavement. There's a long right turn lane southbound on Peachtree that could be repurposed, and a little bit of widening to continue that through movement. And we're also trying to find ways to introduce medians and improve pedestrian crossings. Both of those or enhanced crosswalks. Both of those will help the pedestrian activity in the area, which is, of course, vital to the MARTA station. This is the Dresden at Peachtree intersection. The big move here is adding another northbound through lane on Peachtree. So there's 2 lanes northbound, Peachtree approaching Dresden today. We're going to restripe that right turn lane that runs across the frontage of the MARTA property so that it can go through as well. And we believe this can be done with restriping of that north leg, well, actually restriping of a lot of the pavement here on Peachtree to provide that space. There's a lot of wide lanes there. We're proposing to narrow those down, much like you see in Buckhead, to better utilize the spaces out there. There's a lot of right-of-way constraints in this area, and so we're trying to find ways to do things quickly. The other big one here is an additional westbound right turn lane on Dresden, because we project that right turn movement to be pretty high, and that ends up backing up today into Apple Valley. And then I just want to make sure we touch on pedestrian and bicycle accessibility. We've looked at it. We've looked at it with the residents. It's definitely an important topic to the developer, to MARTA, and especially to the neighbors and neighborhoods. We've gone through some pretty good effort to improve bike accessibility on Dresden. We've got a concept that's included in the conditions before you to do that, and then also developing concept of Apple Valley and how to improve pedestrian crossings on Apple Valley, not to mention the multi-use paths and sidewalks that will be built on and all throughout the project. This just shows the pedestrian accessibility around the site and through the site as well as the green space.
Thank you, and we will reserve any remaining time for rebuttal.
Reserve at 2:50. Okay, that's applicant, opposition. We have a total of 20 minutes. Do we have any opposition?
Yes, I have a good many here. Our first opposition is Kate Jones.
Sorry about that. Good evening. My name is Kate Jones. I live at 2206 Weldonberry Drive, which is in the Briarwood Park District. Let me explain this graphic to you before I get started. We, the citizens and group that is We Are Brookhaven, conducted a survey of 300 and almost 400 plus respondents to date. The survey is still open, but this is a Wordle, or basically a heat map of words that we saw most frequently responded to in that survey. I want to tell you that I was raised here in Brookhaven. I may be of the younger respondents here, but I moved back to Brookhaven to start a family with my husband here, and hopefully he will forgive me for missing our second wedding anniversary tonight to be here. I want you to also understand the gravity of the decision that you're making tonight. It is a 50-plus year decision, and it is a multi-generational decision. My children, my children's children are going to have to live with the decision that's made and the development that is built. So let's talk about what you're hearing and what you haven't heard yet. MARTA would have you believe that they've met with hundreds of citizens for collaborative feedback and negotiations. There were 5 to 6 initial meetings held with the community. They were not advertised or broadly communicated, thus intentionally limiting the number of participants. Many smaller proposed developments have held far more meetings and more publicly done so. Following a self-imposed filing deferral to incorporate citizen feedback, citizen outreach was minimal. At the few meetings that were held, questions were casually brushed off and citizens were sent to various corners of the room to seek information, no doubt in an effort to hush issues raised by more vocal citizens. Then, following the deferral by the Planning Commission a few weeks ago, MARTA will tell you that they met with several citizens to seek feedback and agreed to 6 conditions, which were in addition to the conditions provided by the city staff. What you haven't heard is that in truth, only a small group of those citizens, mostly board members on various HOAs, were selected to participate in those discussions. Aside from Jen Heath, who's with We Are Brookhaven, no individual citizens were invited to participate, and several HOAs were excluded entirely, mine included. Several citizens have voiced opposition to the positions presented by their HOA board members, indicating that those positions held are not representative of the public at large, but only of those voicing the opinions. MARTA would also have you believe that the community is all for the TOD, but the numbers say otherwise. You are not hearing the community if you only listen to MARTA and their partners. and those who speak on behalf of their boards. Let's talk about what else you're going to hear. MARTA will tell you that they conducted a survey to which 565 citizens responded. What they won't tell you is that no effort was made to confirm that respondents were Brookhaven citizens and that repeated submissions were not counted. In fact, 12% of the survey respondents listed other when asked what district they reside in. What this means is where you see support or opposition in the poll of less than 68 respondents, or 12%, these responses are within the margin of error for residents' opinion and may be entirely unindicative of any resident opinion. Furthermore, the MARTA survey questions were built to prevent respondents from accurately communicating their feelings around the development. First off, they prevented respondents from selecting multiple concerns with the development. Only one selection was allowed, highly skewing the results to limit negative feedback, bottom left corner. Allowing respondents to select 3 features that they would like to see incorporated in the development, upper right corner. Asking respondents to select 3 uses that are most important, bottom right corner. Asking respondents their feeling on the importance of the property being developed, independent of the infrastructure and capacity issues. I did not include that one on this slide, but we don't live in a vacuum, so that decision cannot be made. So what else are you going to hear? You're going to hear that MARTA and their partners will tell you that this TOD will attract people to live and work here, minimizing the impact on traffic in the already congested area. They'll tell you that the TOD will reduce the number of trips per household residing on the property, and that a redesign of the traffic signals and lanes will alleviate the traffic impact. Think about it. There is no plan for a Kroger, a Publix, a Costco, a Walmart. These residents are not going to just stay home. The development is not inert. In the bottom left corner, you will see over 1,200 current trips today will increase to 7,100 plus trips by MARTA's own projection. What you see on the far left in the 4 buckets there are 4 of the highly impacted lanes. These are not signals. These are not intersections. These are lanes of traffic that will be impacted. Queues will be extended, and there's obvious concerns with the inflow and outflow to and from the parking garages on Peachtree and Apple Valley, and then on North Druid Hills and Dresden with the overflow. MARTA is already known as the subway to nowhere, and there will be no improvements to the station other than to make it ADA compliant. Their ridership may increase marginally, but as you can see, the development will almost certainly have a devastating impact on traffic. They'll also tell you that this isn't their problem. It's up to the GDOT. Then they'll imply that they're going to help it and bring attention to the GDOT to get the 2 to 4 year traffic project underway. What they won't tell you is who's going to pay for it and when or how they're going to help implement those changes. Per the presentation that you just heard, the solution looks simple. Well, if it's that easy, let's just hire a surveyor with a can of paint. If history repeats itself, we will be sitting in the Brookhaven version of the Lindbergh traffic disaster. Now let's talk about the parking for the development. What they won't tell you is that when the topic was broached, they pushed back heavily on the term maximum efficiency parking for the development, including office, retail, apartments, housing, and MARTA ridership. What MARTA will tell you is that there is no industry standard for calculating maximum parking efficiency. What they won't tell you is that it's a simple back-of-the-envelope calculation that shows it's barely enough parking to meet the demand. Even if trips are reduced, residents will still need to park their cars. While cited as responsible growth, the Kaleidoscope development suffers from a severe parking shortage. Pushing cars to circle the block, park in neighborhoods, and even the valets there can't park your car. Scale that up to the MARTA-sized TOD, you can do the math.
Jennifer Heath.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Heath, 1412 Sylvan Circle, and I'm not going to be as eloquent as Kate is. So, should come up to the next. Okay. Okay, Kate talked a little bit about the MARTA survey, and we got a lot of feedback from the community at large, not necessarily specific individuals as far as organizations, but I was talking to my neighbors, stopping people in the street, going to the restaurants, the stores, et cetera. And a lot of them were saying they didn't agree with the way the format of the MARTA survey was taken. So this random group of individuals wearing red shirts called We Are Brookhaven has come up with a couple of surveys, and one of them is presented in front of you. We gave the citizens of Brookhaven the opportunity to choose multiple items that they had concerns with, and those are the results there. Okay. So we talk about revisions and negotiation. MARTA comes to us and says that they want to put 700 plus rental units on the property. They want to do 2 office buildings. And then all of a sudden, without really a lot of input or anything, they come back and say, hey, we listened to you, we're going to drop it to 340. So that's a 41% reduction. Aren't you guys really happy? And we're going to put 25 less hotel rooms, and we're going to take 20 senior living rooms off, or apartments off. But we're going to add some apartment use, homeowner use, because that's what you want. Now they're telling us they may not build that homeowner use. So there's a lot of speculation in the community that there are other reasons for these changes. Talking about infrastructure, we understand that the city cannot do anything about it. This is a county issue. But looking at some of the comments here, your citizenry doesn't have a whole bunch of faith right now with the current water problems that we have with DeKalb County, and the fact that when you walk your dog, you have to hold your nose. This just kind of says it all. We're exhausted. We've been before you many times. We feel like we fight to get the character area studies, we fight to get the overlay included, and in the middle of it, we've got a bomb dropping on us with MARTA. We're just begging for you to listen to what we have to say about protecting our city. And I'm going to pass it off now. One final note is in the character area studies, there is a picture with the Brookhaven Fields, Brookhaven Heights, and Briarwood comments that said this kind of develop is wanted nowhere. So,
Carrie McBrayer.
Hi, yes, I am Carrie McBrayer. I live at 3348 Inman Drive over by Silver Lake. I've been asked to speak on this section of the presentation, which addresses the survey. I feel that this survey gets to the heart of the real feeling of the citizens of Brookhaven. It's asking overall if you are against, for, or indifferent to the higher density developments being proposed in the Brookhaven, Dresden, Peachtree area, the MARTA station specifically. As you can see, about 70% are against about the type of high density that's being proposed for this area. Others, 15% of people who couldn't say yes or no, but feel like maybe we could do something here, but not exactly what we're looking at now. Another real black and white question is, I believe, yes or no question, I believe that Brookhaven is on the right track with development overall. Given a yes or no type response, people said no. I think that we've gotten a lot of input with our character area studies that will give us a feeling of investment in what happens in our neighborhoods as they are today. And these types of surveys also reflect a hesitancy to start going down a slippery slope with the development at the MARTA station. Once it becomes more real to people that this is happening, I think that there's somewhat a negative or an apathetic point of view that comes into play. So what we really need to do as a city is to come forward and say that we are not ready to approve this project. There are too many unanswered questions. There are questions that affect life safety, the quality of life, and There are a lot of promises that have been made or alluded to that are not quantifiable, that we can't really put our finger on and say, yes, we are protecting ourselves. We're giving our first responders and the firefighters on Dresden Drive a really good shot at getting to the emergencies in our city. The types of answers are nebulous from MARTA and their developers, and I don't think that we can bet the safety and the future of our city on some non-concrete answers from them. Not sure how to move on this. Okay, going forward to the SLUP, this was a question with regard to the height of the office building. The office building, at a minimum, would tower over Peachtree and Dresden, and the SLUP would allow it to get even higher than that. What we're saying is, in this question, do you prefer a building that will not exceed 100 feet in height and has multiple types of materials? That's sort of what the overlay describes. And most everyone said, yeah, we would like to have something that the overlay describes, not this bonus of another 25% increase in height. This is a question which in a way resembles the MARTA's question, was like, would you like to what are the things that you'd really like to see? Would you like to have, I don't know, a kick in the shins, a poke in the eye with a sharp stick, some other, not inevitable, but other types of outcomes that we're going to give you. So in this case, we're just asking if you prefer a glass office building with, another extra story and a half on top of it. Most people say no, they do not. So what we're asking as citizens of this city is that the mayor and the council members consider the welfare, the benefit of our citizens over the needs of an investment company, a development company to make a profit. We ask you that you don't put profit before progress. We would like to develop our city in a sane, careful manner that would come out to be a unique and wonderful place for everyone to move to and for the people who already live here to enjoy. We don't want Brookhaven, obviously. We don't want to look like Manhattan. We don't want to be Brookhead. We don't want to be Buckhead. We don't want to be Brookburg Station, which is a reference to the Lindbergh Station, which it was a good try, but it's not quite a home run. So anyway, we were asking you, don't let MARTA and their investment development company take you for a ride. Be smarta and deny.
Daisy Ottman. Was that Ms. Heath speaking?
No, that was Ms. McBrayer.
McBrayer, okay. Kathleen Heath then.
No.
Okay.
I'm only going to take a second.
Kathleen Heath, 1416 Sylvan Circle. I sent you a copy of the petition that we'd submitted to the Planning Commission in September 7th. And we had 382 citizens sign it. That MARTA has addressed, or the developer has addressed one of the issues by adding the sound barrier, which we appreciate. But the other 5 issues have not been addressed. Their improvements to Peachtree are great, but they're turning the traffic into the neighborhood by making them take a ride out on Dresden. And so at 5 o'clock, when any of us are trying to get home and that office building is emptying, it's going to be a nightmare. And we need to know where those cars are going to go in our neighborhoods. And we need to understand and have them help mitigate what they're doing by sending the traffic to the interior of the neighborhood. So the improvements on Peachtree are great, but the problem is they're turning the traffic away from it. We also do not want to approve the SLUP. We think that an 8-story building is already pushing it on Peachtree. It will change the character of the neighborhood, and we also know that it is possible to have another 8-story building on the other side of the street in the Total Wine parking lot, if they ever redevelop that. So that's not what most people envision when they see Brookhaven, thinking of Buckhead. The sewer, we know, again, that's not something you guys can directly address, but we depend upon you to help protect us. So, just please help us out there. And the tax abatement, obviously, that's a hot topic, but it's something that most of the citizens are not in favor of. So, appreciate your help. Thank you very much.
And Daisy Ottman.
Thank you. I'm Daisy Ottman. I live at 2539 LJ Drive, which is at the corner of Dresden and LJ. I made a decision to speak tonight as a last-minute thing, so no slides, but I have given this a great deal of thought. Where I sit, and I mean literally sit in my kitchen every morning, drinking several cups of coffee, I see the traffic on Dresden. We have a new problem on my street, which I will call a 2016 problem. It didn't happen before. Half the time in the morning, I cannot get my car out of my own driveway because there is such a backup of traffic going toward Dresden, and so therefore cutting through from Briarcliff and probably from Buford Highway, not coming from the apartment buildings, but coming into Dresden. I see them going the other way after school's out. And I would say that on Dresden, you can probably get across the street without pushing buttons, maybe between 1:30 and 2:30 in the afternoon. Traffic's light. The rest of the time, it's solid. I came here today at about 10 till 7. I made a left turn off of LJ onto Dresden, and traffic was completely backed up all the way back down to Peachtree. I counted 60-some-odd cars waiting to get through the lights. And at the same time, just as I passed the fire station, the 2 fire trucks were trying to get out and make a left turn. It wasn't happening. It's a 2-lane road. At the Planning Commission meeting, I was very struck with what I would call a dough moment, because I realized that yes, the MARTA and CSX tracks do create a physical, no way to be adjusted barrier. It's a bottleneck, and the bottleneck won't go away. I look at the Lindbergh station development, and I notice that most of the traffic goes off and on to Piedmont, which is also a pretty busy street, but it's nothing like dumping traffic back onto Dresden, which we just can't get around. And that's really all I wanted to say tonight. Thank you.
We do have 1 minute, 29 seconds left.
And Ricardo Kaminsky.
Do you skip Donna Hall? Sorry, sir. Donna here?
Hi, my name is Donna Hall. I live at 1310 Fernwood Circle in Brookhaven, right behind the entrance to the Apple Valley MARTA parking lot. I had the pleasure of taking a trip to the Lindbergh station, and I, being an amateur photographer, decided to shoot some photos. By profession, I sell real estate, so I have a pretty good eye for what makes good real estate and what makes for bad real estate. All of the council and mayor have received my photos with a little 1-sentence line on the top of it. Let me quickly tell you a summary of how I would say what I found. There was multiple vacant spaces, probably a dozen, one after another, streets upon streets of vacant commercial spaces at the Lindbergh Todd development. There's no free parking ever, anywhere. Meters and gates and revenue generating. I found 2 fountains outside the leasing office and one in a residential center that were dried up, non-functioning, no water. I took photos of apartments, residents' patios. My subject matter, a rice cooker box, office chairs on the ground level patio setting, bicycles, exposed uncovered exterior electric sockets, multiple ladders
Ma'am.
stored on
Ma'am,
decks.
we've run out of time.
We've run out of time,
Yep.
right in the middle of a sentence.
I know. Sorry about that.
Okay?
Thank you. Is there,
getting into
it's
the
support.
juicy
As you can see, there were 3 more for opposition, and I had 12 that just didn't want to speak for opposition. And our first one for support is Mickey Roberts.
Good evening. My name is Mickey Roberts. I live at 1350 Fernwood Circle. I'm president of the Fernwood Park Homeowners Association. We have 72 homes that are directly across Apple Valley from the Brookhaven MARTA TOD. We are kind of on the front lines, so to speak. All homeowners of the townhomes at Fernwood Park are dues-paying members. FPHOA membership includes water, landscaping, and certain other amenities. We have 8 live-work units on Apple Valley Road directly across the street from the MARTA TOD. Business offices are on the ground floor with living areas and bedrooms on upper floors, which are directly across the street from the proposed food hall with the rooftop dining. We also have 27 homes that are on the one-way portion of Fernwood Circle, with the only exit being out onto Apple Valley. As part of this process, the Fernwood Park Homeowners Association sent reminders to all residents about public meetings, commission meetings, and so forth. We provided links to published information regarding the project. We also met with MARTA and the developers as a board on 4 occasions, and we sent detailed reports of what happened at those meetings to all of our residents. We provided contact information for our residents. We held a community meeting, or a meeting in our community Zen Garden, inviting all residents to come share their opinions on this development. And then finally, between October 18th and October 22nd, we sent a survey to all residents with the ability to also make comments. Out of 112 possible responses, we had 54, which is a 48% response, and this is what we found. The first question was, what is your overall opinion regarding the MARTA rezoning application? 22% of our residents said they were opposed. 22% said they were not opposed given the conditions, and we had 37. That was a mix-up because we thought the Planning Commission had 37. They have 36. Given the conditions that have been recommended, we had 42.5% said they were in favor of it with the conditions. We had 3.7% saying they were in favor of it with no conditions, and we had 9% that had other issues. So if you add those together, in our survey, we had 68.5% that were in favor, and we had 22% that were opposed. The second question, do you think Fernwood Park Homeowners Association should take a position on this issue? 25% said yes, we should oppose the request. 66% said yes, we should favor the request with the conditions. And 9.4% said that our homeowners association should not take any position on this issue at all. We had a third category that asked for comments, and as a summary, I can just tell you that, as you know, traffic, sewer, too much density, concerned about the development timeline in that we will be living in a construction zone, turning Brookhaven into concrete jungle, concerns over crime, opposition to tax abatements. Although 66% of our respondents indicated that the Homeowners Association should take a position favoring this request for zoning with conditions, our board met, and it is our desire to merely make you aware of where our residents stand and let you form whatever opinion you may from these numbers. Thank you.
Giles Stevens.
Hi, my name is Giles Stevens. I live at 1195 Thornwell Drive, Brookhaven Heights. I've been on the MARTA Citizens Review Board, and I'm also the president of the Brookhaven Heights Homeowner Association. You know, I'd say that I wanted to speak in favor of this, certainly with the conditions being met and strictly adhered to. You know, as the council members know, I've been very, very outspoken about traffic, you know, and we've been working hard to make sure that the MARTA team helps keep that in effect with the neighborhoods, keeping the sanctity of our neighborhoods that adjoin this property or adjacent to it are certainly mitigated as best as possible. There's certainly a lot of questions. I mean, out of the 400 homes in our neighborhood, we certainly have a mix of support and opposition, but I think that having attended, you know, hours and hours and hours for what seems like almost over a year on this project, I'd say there's been a lot of input, a lot of pushback from the Citizens Review Board, and I think that, you know, I think the outcome still has some work to be done at the staff level, but I'd ask for you guys to approve it.
Eric Stevens.
Good evening, members of the council. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. My name again is Eric Stevens, 1170 Pelly Circle. A lot of people come at this talking about it being something that's just come up or a project that's been all of a sudden in the public light. Well, this has really been a 12-year effort, and I believe someone mentioned this is going to be a 50-year investment decision. So there's been a lot of thought and planning that's gone into this process. It started with the BPCA. It started with looking at an LCI study that generated and looked at where is the best place for development density in Brookhaven, that being the MARTA station. Many people like myself have moved to Brookhaven, wanted to be close to the MARTA station. My house is within walking distance of the MARTA station. It was done on purpose. It was done with the idea that one day my house would probably be worth a couple $1 million because of that ability to walk to a MARTA station. It is shown in other places, and it will happen here in the future. It's very interesting as we talk and listen to the project. Traffic, a lot of the issues, I think, Mayor Ernst, you've mentioned in other meetings that traffic is an issue here, always will be, and we're going to have to best mitigate it. The traffic related to these types of developments initially have problems, yes, and there will be people that are coming to and from developments. But as we develop out the city and we create a smarter grid and a smarter pattern, you'll have reduction in travel, and you are setting the pattern because it is a 50-year investment. We really can't live in a bubble in Brookhaven. There have been many communities that try to live in a bubble and protect themselves from all the forces in and around themselves. It never works. Being proactive and putting a development in place that helps advance our community is what's needed. And that's really what democracy is about. It's give and take. It's hearing a lot of the things. And I applaud the effort of our Planning Commission. They did a great job, I think, listening to all of the public testimony that happened here over this thing. One last thing I wanted to mention about this is economic development. We talk about having a city and needing a better balance of jobs. Having the office tower is a key portion of that. I'm very supportive of the idea of the SLUP and increasing the height so that we have the type of profile and building that will allow for a Class A office tenant that will bring in a premier tenant that will pay to our tax base. So in conclusion, I want to say that I'm in support of the zoning application as well as the SLUP application for the increased height, and appreciate your time and Godspeed in making a decision.
Bill Roberts.
I'm Jack Hundred, and Bill has allowed me to take his turn. We're going to swap turns. Jack Hundred, 1408 Tugaloo Drive in Brookhaven Fields, a 34-year Brookhaven residence. You do the math. That was before the MARTA station was here. I'd like to look at this project big picture with you tonight. I believe we have an obligation to our kids and grandkids to find a sustainable way to live. I love my car, and I love all the freedom and flexibility it gives me, and our development patterns ensure that most of us will be dependent on cars for a long, long time into the future. But we're facing serious car congestion issues, not to mention air quality issues and climate change driven partly by car use. That's why it's so important to welcome new development patterns, and especially TOD, transit-oriented design. What we build will last a long time, as you've heard other people say. We need to begin providing alternatives to a car-only future. Let's talk about car congestion. The Tenet-County Atlanta metro area today contains about 4.4 million people and 3 million cars or vehicles. Those numbers are expected to grow 5% by 2020. Adding 150,000 vehicles while street capacity remains largely unchanged. Actual car congestion is forecast to be worse than just adding the vehicles. Texas A&M Transportation Institute has put out an annual report since 1984 entitled Urban Mobility Scorecard. The 2015 report contains good news and bad news for Metro Atlanta. The good news is that we're better than almost any other major U.S. city, New York City, L.A., Washington, Boston, Seattle, Chicago, you name it. We have fewer problems than we do in terms of traffic congestion, but it says it's a nationwide problem. The bad news is that car congestion is more closely tied to economic growth than to simply the number of cars on the road. That means more jobs, we drive more. Brookhaven, given our location as a gateway to Lenox and Buckhead, could even experience greater congestion growth. So they're predicting an increase of not just 5%, but 25% by 2020 in time lost to congestion as the economy grows and adds jobs. From any perspective, car congestion is not a bear we're going to outrun. In fact, to follow the metaphor, it's not really a bear at all. It's our own shadow. We love our cars and our freedom to go where we want, when we want. It feels like a birthright to those like me, like all of us probably, growing up in the last 50 years. Unfortunately, the numbers say it won't last. So let's talk about air quality. We, as the most modern of modern people, have created a marvelous economic engine, one that's brought us undreamed prosperity. But one that depends on burning immense stores of fossil fuel and slowly changing the composition of our atmosphere. Carbon dioxide levels have increased to amounts not seen on the Earth for 2 million years. And cars are a notable component of our fossil fuel burn. One car emits about 6 tons of CO2 a year, roughly what 1/2 acre of forest can capture. And we can only guess at the larger impact this will have for us in the future, but scientists have projections. They're not pretty, but we'll let that go for now. But what does this all mean? According to people who think about these things, our current path is not sustainable. And our development patterns ensure that most of us will be dependent on our car for a long time in the future. For our quality of life to be sustainable, we need to find new ways to live with less dependence on cars. And that's why it's so important to welcome new development patterns, and especially transit-oriented development. The ability to live or work near a MARTA station gives people choices, a chance to live without a car or to keep one's car parked. We see increasing numbers of people, particularly young people and other single people, making this choice. It's one that benefits both the person who chooses to live without a car and those of us who choose to use a car daily. Based on emerging patterns, it's reasonable to project that of the roughly 2,000 people that will be living and working at the MARTA station if it were built out under the proposed plan, 1/4 of them, or 500, would do without a car. Given that this will be a somewhat self-selecting group, they will choose to live by the MARTA station for a reason. That number may be significantly higher. From an environmental perspective, and just going back to our math, taking a car off the road equals planting 1/2 acre of trees. So if we were to allow 500 people to live without a car, it'd be like adding 250 acres of forest. That's how much parkland we have in Brookhaven right now. There are good reasons to move forward with the proposed MARTA development. There are other good reasons. It will add jobs, it'll bring amenities such as restaurants for our neighbors, create a vibrant city center, improve the walkability of the area. But I'm focusing on the sustainable aspect tonight because I think that's important and other people have not brought it up. This plan represents, as people have said, 50 years of Atlanta planning, the last 12 years an intensive effort led by professional planners, supported by the ARC, with numerous sessions for public education as well as input. And contrary to what some would suggest on social media, this is not and has never been some backroom conspiracy by development types or a scheme by MARTA to make money. It is a plan by thoughtful professionals who have studied the issues, care deeply about the future, and want to give future generations a better chance to live well in Brookhaven and Atlanta. So you have heard many firsthand accounts of the angst tonight of waiting in traffic. You've heard many of the anxieties change of this nature will bring. Those are all real. And this is about life in Brookhaven. And yet it's a lot bigger than Brookhaven as well. It's about Metro Atlanta. It's about the U.S. It's about the world. We have our immediate concerns of getting to work on time and picking up the kids. At the same time, we're making a 50-year decision, as you know, on development. And if we're to give our children a chance at a sustainable future, we need to make forward-looking decisions today. The wise decision, as you know, is often not the easy decision. I would ask you tonight to let this project proceed. It's not perfect, but it meets the planning criteria laid out over the last 12 years. It meets overlay requirements. It creates a city center. It is conditioned on road changes that will neutralize the traffic impact, and it represents a step toward a more sustainable development pattern for our future. So I have shoes, I have a bike, I have a MARTA card, an Uber account, and of course I have my car. I don't know exactly what the future holds, but I'm ready for it, and I hope you will lead us there. Just as one aside on some of the opposition comments, I would just like to point out that this is not, the We Are Brookhaven survey is not a scientific survey. It's a very self-selecting survey. I know many people who have been turned off by We Are Brookhaven and would not participate. I know I looked at it and did not participate, and I had others tell me the same. If the city decides to make governing decisions by survey, and I'm not advocating that as a good path, then I think you would owe it to yourselves and the citizens to hire a professional survey plan, have an education effort, and do a scientifically based survey. Obviously, 400 citizens is a far cry from the 50,000 people that live in Brookhaven. Thank you.
Okay, Bill Roberts, does he want to speak?
We have 4:35 left.
You told me that because you know I talk a lot, right? Bill Roberts, 1059 Standard Drive, here representing the BPCA. Would like to start out by saying the BPCA is supporting this project. We support the TOD zoning as well as the SLUP. This conditionally, we want to offer our support because we want to see the design review board continue, the citizens review board continue. We think that that's an important criteria, mainly because we don't want to repeat of what happened with the similar project, the Town Brookhaven project. I was involved in that, as all the BPCA folks were. We went to lots of meetings like this over many years, and it ultimately came down to a lot of broken promises and changes after the fact, administrative variances, all kind of things that the folks didn't have a chance to really see the details of, and so it got approved. Again, this was not on your watch, so I don't want to hang this on the city of Brookhaven's neck, but it just shows you when you have a project of this magnitude, the details matter, and I'm sympathetic to the We Are Brookhaven folks. I've been in those shoes. I've never come and spoken in favor of a project before. You guys that know me see me as the guy that fought Walgreens tooth and nail. Obviously, the Town Brookhaven project was disappointing. It could have been so much better than it is. So this is the first time I've come and spoke in favor, and the reason why is the development team and MARTA, in my mind, have been pretty genuine about listening to feedback and trying to make changes where it was appropriate. There was a lot of constructive comments that they incorporated, and the slide deck earlier showed kind of the give and take process, what they originally proposed and kind of where they're at now. I don't think that they should be criticized for that. I think that's a nice thing, that they were willing to make significant adjustments. On one percentage was a 40% change based on direct feedback from the community of what they did not want. So that's an indication that they're willing to be cooperative, and they have a sincere agenda to put a project that we can be proud of out there. It is a significant project. It is going to have a dramatic impact on Brookhaven. What the overlay tries to do, and there's a lot of people that criticize it, is really comes down to a couple basic principles. Put buildings out there that are made of quality materials with a lot of detail, architectural detail, that are attractive, that create a sense of place unique to Brookhaven, and also a commitment to usable public open space. At the similar Town Brookhaven project, there was a cynical use of the green space to create a green traffic divider in the entry to the project. It did not become a festival space. That's what they promised. And this project, they're calling it a city green, a town green that's going to be useful for a festival space. And again, that's a nice thing. The overlay drives that kind of development behavior. So for the folks that are wondering why the overlay exists and what good comes out of it, that's that alone. When they go and take advantage of that green space in a couple of years, that'll be a benefit of the overlay. So I want to make sure people realize that it is basically a development guideline document that kind of governs what's important to the community when a project like this is going to happen. So, and finally, I'd like to say again, the development team, there's been a lot of people questioning kind of, are they really going to make these kind of changes that they're talking about? Do they really have details that they're not sharing? They'd rather get approval before the details come out. It is a difficult process. They have conceptual plans or preliminary plans. They're asking for approval based on that. And this is the chicken and egg thing that frustrates community citizens, because we'd like to see detail. They're not going to make a financial commitment to put a ton of detail out there because it's not justified until they get approval for the project. So we're stuck in this chicken and egg process. But what we'd like to see as an antidote to that is the Citizens Review Board that after the fact continues to have some influence on the design, and that way maybe we can arrive at something that everybody will be happy with. But we would like to ask you to vote in favor of this tonight to get the project started. Thank you.
Mary Ellen Layden.
With
41 seconds.
41 seconds.
Mary Ellen Layden, 2942 Crosswick Forest Drive. I'm speaking as a private citizen, as a member of the BPCA, and I'm looking at the history of this project. We're now in round 3, and it certainly has been a big one. But I believe that MARTA has been very patient with us, and I'd like to see approval with conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to use the 14 seconds? In support. In support. Seeing none. Seeing none. Closing. Oh, yeah, I'll have the 250. There we go.
All right. Well, following that presentation, or those presentations, I'm going to take out stock and SurveyMonkey. I think everybody else should. There was a MARTA survey. We did not present it tonight because it was done to solicit feedback. It was one of the many methods that we did to solicit feedback, similar to the CRB, similar to the public meetings that we had. Surveys obviously can be skewed. You ask somebody whether they want to go to work, the answer is usually no. But then when you say, well, you're not going to have any money to eat, or you're not going to have a nice house to live in if you don't go to work, well, then the answer tends to change. Looking just briefly at the We Are Brookhaven survey, it provides having multiple types of materials for the office buildings, such as brick and stone. Well, you're required to have 50% masonry. That's not suggested in there. It talks about having street trees. How important are they on Peachtree Road? Well, we're planning to have street trees on Peachtree Road. We're required to by the overlay. There's questions about having the parking deck entrance on Peachtree. Would you rather have it there or Apple Valley? We had it there. I showed you all the plan. We had the parking deck for the office building on Peachtree, and it was suggested that we should move it. It was not an appropriate place to have the parking deck. It should be moved more interior to the project. This is obviously a complex project, and we have tried to solicit the public input for this. With regard to parking, just quickly, we're not asking for any variance. We're required to have 1,532 spaces. We're providing 2,096 spaces. That includes 564 MARTA. MARTA does not have a parking requirement, but we are meeting the project requirements in addition to the 560 spaces for MARTA. We also have 5.49 acres, if you count Fernwood Park, of publicly accessible open space. And a 17 plus or minus acre tract, that's a lot of publicly accessible open space, or at least it is to me. With regard to the sewer question, again, I'll just sum it up in one word. We won't get permits if their sewer capacity and the sewer issues are not resolved. I understand that that's of a big concern, but that's not a zoning issue. That is something that is a permitting issue, and functionally, it's the developer's concern too. Traffic, I'm not a traffic engineer. I understand there are traffic models that project the traffic. I think Rob said to you, the traffic at Peachtree and Dresden today fails. It fails, period. We are projecting that the improvements proposed will make the traffic work with the improvements to be made. I know that the Peachtree was just striped out in front of the project recently, so it doesn't paved and striped, so it doesn't seem like there's anything new coming for a while. Thank you.
Thank you. Turn it off. And with that, I will close public hearing. Bates, you want to?
Yeah, I have some questions. Right now, we're just doing questions.
Questions, yeah.
So question for the traffic engineering. Rob, if you can come on back up. I wanted to ask specifically about the slide you had up there where you showed conditions if the project were approved and the recommended traffic conditions that you have in this proposal, what's the letter grade after, what was the letter grade?
Letter
After
grade
those-
was level of service E.
E.
So
it's currently F at the Dresden, and
that's correct.
is it also F at North Druid Hills currently?
Currently, at North Druid Hills, I think it's either D or E.
Yeah, and then, but you're projected out, no improvements, it's F at both.
Right, that's correct.
And then if the improvements were made as part of this project, you're saying that they would both, Dresden and North Druid would be at E?
That's correct.
So, okay. Thank you. That's the only question I had on traffic, unless anybody else had something. Another question that I had was specific to the green space at Fernwood Park. So I'm not sure who's best from the development team to answer that.
I'll start and we'll allocate as needed.
Sure. This is a significant opportunity, particularly for the neighborhood in Brookhaven Fields, where they're going to be bearing the brunt of the impacts of this development on the backside. So the Fernwood Park, as it currently exists, has three owners. City of Brookhaven in this small portion down by Sylvan Circle at the end at Fernwood Circle. Then you've got MARTA's detention property. And then you have the library at the end. One of the things that, as you mentioned in your presentation, was that we started off with this comprehensive look at Fernwood Park to develop it in a very comprehensive way. We've gone back and forth. What we have before us tonight is a proposal that from my understanding, really is just talking about what we're going to do with that detention pond, the MARTA property, in essence. Is that correct, that they're really, other than, I think there's a condition about the sidewalks around the park, is there anything else that is in this plan that actually impacts Fernwood Park?
The park is a tricky location because it has the existing stormwater. It obviously has floodplain and stream buffer considerations. That stormwater area will have to be upgraded for the new development. So what that form and function will be will require the civil engineers to actually do all the math, assuming the project gets approved, and design the stormwater system. So from that perspective, we have been a bit reluctant to give any specific plan for that, only because we don't have control over it. The Army Corps gets a say, Brookhaven staff gets a say. There's a lot of folks who get a say in what happens in there. We have narrowed down the area that we think will be impacted by the stormwater facilities to about a 1.08 acre area, and we presented that at the Planning Commission as part of our open space plan. With regard to the actual improvements in the park itself, Condition 35 does include a provision for a 6-foot wide path and boardwalk, and that's something, and/or boardwalk, and that's something we had discussed with the community. As far as a specific plan, due to the number of people who are involved in approving it, we can't provide one at this time.
So one of the things that currently exists in that property is that it is I'll just say it's a non-functioning, actually I take that back, it's a functioning stormwater detention pond, but it certainly has, leaves a lot to be desired. Aesthetically, it does not look good. We've got stagnant water in there, and I'm, even if you go back to the MARTA charrettes, in 2013 when we talked about this development, it was one of the highest items that the people in the community wanted to see was the creation of a long linear park with Fernwood Park. And I know that we've got to deal with multiple parties, but two of those are the ones talking here tonight. It's MARTA and the applicant and the city. And the library, as another public entity, I believe is very willing to have that conversation. And there is it is extremely important that we don't miss the opportunity to plan this park out, because the time to do that is now. We know that under the current conditions, the stormwater runoff, we've got a parking lot, all concrete. Everything's running off into that development. And when you have this proposed development where you have some significant green space, you're going to have some pervious material. So we'll have probably a reduction in the overall stormwater runoff from the property. But to have a fenced-in stormwater pond that is really the only amenity that we're going to create in Fernwood Park other than a sidewalk issue is a very serious gap in creating a plan that I believe the city should move forward with. Would you be willing to actually take this, and one of the ways that I've talked to some other professionals about this stormwater issue is that we take all of the stormwater, bury it and retain it on site. We could talk about, how the developer does that. I know that there are costs associated with doing that. But the trade-off becomes that we can create a park that is no longer just a fenced-in gully, but actually is just that excess capacity in the 100-year flood event that retains that excess overage, and then you can program the entire Fernwood Park in a comprehensive solution. Is that something that the applicant can consider? I don't know that y'all people here or not, but
I'm going to make Casey Warfield, who is our civil engineer and responsible for the stormwater, to come up and answer that.
Okay.
One thing, just from a planning perspective, I know there have been plans developed for Fernwood Park, and we were hoping, I guess, in the initial discussions about whether to even include this parcel at all in the zoning, and it was suggested, oh, you should include it because, number one, then y'all can condition it, and number two, MARTA was willing to make this land available for the park. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, still happy to make it available for the park, subject to whatever challenges Casey's going to tell you about.
Right.
Good evening. Casey Warfield, Kimberly Horn, 817 West Peachtree Street. As Jessica alluded to, there are some challenges with the park and doing anything with it other than kind of what's out there now, even though, as we'll all admit, it is an eyesore. It's not the most beautiful thing to look at. It is governed by the Army Corps of Engineers, and it's also governed by state and city stream buffers. To remove the stormwater functionality that it is now will require review and approval by all of those entities it's an active stream now, and to make it a use that is functional given the topography, it would have to be piped or culvert created from the headwater just behind the library and through there. I'm not going to say that it can't be done, hasn't been done in the past, but generally our experience is the Army Corps and the state stance is that they don't like to see that. They like to see more of a stream restoration and bring it back to its natural beauty and habitat in that regard. So there are challenges that are outside of the developer's control that, while we'd love to agree to them, we just don't have control or ability to say yes or no that is something that we can do.
So if I'm in practice, in this, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but best practices, would the Army Corps of Engineers, or if it's the Georgia DNR, whoever is controlling that stream, that natural spring that's behind the library, if you were just having the potential excess runoff, if you were to maintain all the stormwater capacity on site in a buried facility or some other means, and then you just had your 100-year flood sort of excess runoff potentially going into that stream, would that be a practice that has been done around as a possibility?
Yeah, that is a possibility. And one of the things that we're doing as part of this development, and what's different in the development now from when it was originally constructed back in the early 80s, is that now state standards and regulations require a water quality component.
Right.
That is something that we're going to have to treat, detain, and account for on site, and just given space constraints, it's going to be in an underground system. Mm-hmm. And what that is doing, in essence, is it's providing, and kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but TSS removal regulations and those sorts of things prior to discharging into the natural environment in the stream itself. So that is one thing that we will be required to do, and the developer is actively planning on doing to bring up to current code and regulation.
Well, I certainly see how creating a much more functional stream, restoring the stream bank, and having flow adequately move through that Fernwood Park is really important, particularly when we have the existing conditions of, yes, we have a stormwater detention that fills up on MARTA's stormwater, but whether it's just not functioning right now or if it's a design problem, the bottom part, the city's park parcel, currently floods all the way up, creating a lake the size of pretty much the entire parcel that the city currently owns. And we need to have a more efficient way to handle stormwater so that we can have an amenity that won't flood out with trash and mud whenever we have a big storm, which is certainly a concern for the community sort of downstream from this development, Brookhaven Fields and Drew Valley, which both currently suffer from significant stormwater issues. Thank you.
Questions? Real quick, Chris, speaking of stormwater, wasn't there an issue about right-of-way and how are we going to get that stormwater to wherever we're going, right?
Yeah, there's a question that's not resolved in the record about how the water is currently getting from the current MARTA site across Apple Valley into the detention facility on the east side or southeast side of Apple Valley. We've asked for the county's records with respect to the construction and whether or not they granted any easements. Our own research has not been able to find any easements, so we're not exactly sure how it is that the water is getting from one side of Apple Valley to the other, at least according to any of the records we've been able to locate.
Questions? Looking like you're about to ask a question, John. Or, okay, Beds?
Oh, no.
We have any more questions?
I have a question for staff. Let's assume, our water quality standard is that I believe, if my reading of the ordinance is correct, that the standard for new development is that you do stormwater management as if it were a new construction from a natural setting. Is that correct? Can someone describe that to me exactly?
Councilman, it's my understanding from what I've read that the post-development, and perhaps Kimberly Horn can shed some light on this, the post-development must meet the pre-development standard. Now, pre-development, does that mean what's currently there in place or whether it's a natural state? I'm not exactly sure on. I'd have to review the ordinance on that.
What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I can speak on that, and having recently permitted several projects here in the city and working with staff, the pre-development state that they impose on the developer is not the current state, which in this case would be the parking lot, but it is a truly pre-developed state of a wooded or field grassed condition back to an purely pervious site for those areas that are being disturbed.
Another question I have is that, after the parking lot and the station was constructed, and that retention pond, which obviously is failing, is in place, there have been a lot of changes to the stormwater regulations for retention. So my initial feel on that, just by doing a WAC test, is that putting a stormwater retention facility in a stream buffer would not follow standard practices today. Is that correct?
That is correct. If we were going out to construct this from scratch today, you wouldn't get a permit to construct your stormwater in an active live stream. For instances where it's been developed that way and permitted approved in the past, you are allowed, or the Army Corps and state representatives in the EPD do allow for that to remain in active use.
So if we were to maintain it as an active floodplain creek watershed, but take the stormwater component out of it, would there have to be any permitting involved to do that?
It would, because it's a water of the state in the U.S., the Army Corps would still actively review and permit it, as would the state with the stream buffer variances. Even if you're bringing it back to a natural state and removing a pond or whatever it may be, it still requires all of their reviews and approvals which, as I mentioned before, is kind of something out of our control and ability to state for certain one way or the other whether they would be.
What if you made no changes to the functionality whatsoever and basically had it be a redundant system and having all the stormwater retention and water quality treatment and peak flow management done on site?
If we had no active construction on or disturbance on the existing pond, then we wouldn't need to seek variances from those or seek approvals from those agencies.
And the scale of this development in terms of its size, the economics would justify doing all the peak flow and water quality functions on site, possibly using a vault.
It's, I'm not an economist or really dive into the details of the cost of these sorts of things. Generally, our experience in working with other developers is it's a much more economical solution to have it on an above-grade pond system. When you have a dense in-town urban site, a 1 acre high-rise or something of those, and you're going 20, 30, 40 stories up, whatever it may be, then the economics of an underground system support that much better. But I can't say for certain, one way or the other in that.
Wasn't Town Brookhaven a system just like that? Where it's a vaulted system, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe they've got underwater.
Yeah, I believe so.
Or underground.
Yes,
Yeah, so-
underground vault, I believe.
Right.
So, okay. So I guess the economics work there.
I have no further questions.
So I have a question, I think, for the applicant, not so much on storm water. It's a big question. We hit on it a little bit, the money part. Who's paying for some of this stuff? So the questions come up. We've heard about tax abatements, tax incentives. I think that there have been discussions with city staff. I've heard numbers floating around in articles and in the community. But we know that we've got some infrastructure costs to make this happen. Now we're talking about potential for underground stormwater detention. Who's paying for I'm going to just ask you, who's paying for the MARTA parking lot? Do we know? Yeah.
The funding sources, as you know, are something that's part of a different process from the zoning. We are in the process, as you mentioned, of discussions with the Development Authority, which would be a separate process about possible funding options. With regard to the sewer issues, we are anticipating or hoping to find alternate funding for what is more of a system issue as opposed to a project issue through either combination with other developers that are having similar issues for joint infrastructure. Hoping that DeKalb County will help participate with us from a tap fee perspective. But as far as who specifically is going to be paying for every item, that is to be determined.
Yeah, it's a big one, and I don't know that it's for every item, but for me, it's at least I can give you some kind of clarity, at least from my personal position on this. When we have requests to see incentives or inducements to create the development that we're talking about here. There needs to be a public benefit if the city is going to be asking its taxpayers or the receiving tax entities to waive their receipts, whether that be the city, the county, or the school system. Things like improvements to our road system are certainly something that has a public benefit that I can see clearly where there's a benefit to the greater community if we can fix our problems on Peachtree Road, Dresden Drive, and North Druid Hills. When we talk about things like a MARTA parking lot, that does not have as much of a public benefit. I think it has some. I may drive my car up there and park in there. I hope to walk up to it more, as I do today. But it is a large discussion because we're talking about millions of dollars in these tax abatements. I've heard anywhere between 15 and 25 million. Not sure what that number is, but it's a big consideration for the citizens to know if there's going to be some kind of incentive in this program, what's it going to be for? And are our citizens aware of what those, I truly believe that this needs to be a more transparent process, not just between the Development Authority and the developer, but it needs to be something that we're discussing as a part of this zoning to understand what is going to be the true benefit that ultimately is going to be funded if there are going to be inducements created on this property. Just my 2 cents on this one.
From a zoning perspective, the zoning does not address at all who funds, and it typically would not. The funding discussion is an ongoing discussion, obviously, in a separate process from this. It is underway, but has not formalized in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
With regard to the benefit the community is getting from this development, well, let's see, you're getting 1.28 acres and streetscape all around the project. You're getting I think it was over 5 acres of publicly accessible open space. I've heard the discussions about Fernwood Park, which is not currently provided in any way, shape, or form for use by the public. You're getting a town green, you're getting an upgraded transit plaza, and you're getting a development that will provide tax rolls. I mean, this project is currently not on the tax rolls, so you're going to have a tax benefit from this project. But again, I go back to the zoning process. How things are funded is not a component of a rezoning request. From a practical perspective, if the funding is not there, the development will not go forward.
Right. And I certainly understand that. And I don't mean to tie the zoning decision to to any tax incentive talk. But I do think that is a concern that we as council need to have that discussion and really have a little bit more clarity about. Because some of these benefits that we just don't have certainty around are going to be a part of that funding discussion, particularly when we're talking about things like Fernwood Park or, some of the traffic issues. I do have one last question, but
No, go ahead.
It's about traffic, so maybe, I'm sorry, I forgot about this one, but this one is a hot button issue. So I know that there has been discussion about it at Apple Valley and Dresden Drive. And it's not in the current plan because I've heard that it just doesn't work. It's something that won't allow it to function. Do you know what that problem is that would prevent us from having a roundabout at Apple Valley and Dresden?
So I don't believe we specifically analyzed a roundabout at that intersection.
Oh.
However, a roundabout at that location, one of the main concerns would be impacts to properties in the area.
Mm-hmm.
When you build a roundabout, you don't just impact one property, you impact everything.
Right.
And there is queuing from Peachtree.
Mm-hmm.
On occasion, it might queue into that roundabout, and if you do have a queue that goes into a roundabout, it shuts down. Intersections can still function slowly, but they function. If you ever have a queue that goes through a roundabout, it shuts everybody down. So those would just be a couple of the concerns off the top of my head for that.
So I would say that it is, it's something that I know was discussed, and I believe maybe our city staff has looked at the functionality of it. I'm not sure if Georgia DOT has looked at it, but we have a significant problem on Dresden Drive, and flow is the biggest problem.
Right.
So I'd love us to do a more detailed look at that. I mean, to me, if there's a way to paint the box, or paint the circle, so people aren't in there and backing it up and queuing it, you could have flow going in that, non-traffic congested way all day long.
And what we found was a lot of the problems that you see out there today are not necessarily due to Apple Valley at Dresden, is due to Peachtree at Dresden. And so a lot of that backs up and impacts, once it propagates through one intersection, it can go a lot further.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Question, go ahead.
Yeah,
Chuck.
it's just the traffic, just to finish up. So when you do the DRI and you look at the traffic flows and you come up with your answer of the restriping and the extra lane, and pretty much it's the maximum you can do given the space that we have to work with. As the point was just made, you've got a tunnel there. You know, we're constricted by the area that we're able to work within. When you do your light timing, are you staying just in that perimeter or is it expansive? How far beyond that do you go with the timing?
So with the study, we included the next intersection up and down the stream. So we went up to Osborne on Peachtree, down to Colonial on Peachtree, and the next intersections off to the east and south on Dresden and Northwood Hills. And so we included those as well so you can capture that progression or lack of progression. Sometimes it might feel like that. And so we do account for that coordination between the signals.
Is that far enough?
Yes, yeah, it's the next intersections down are far enough away that you lose a good bit of that progression factor.
Okay, thank you.
Speaking of DRI, again, do we have conditions here that basically everything in the DRI gets done for this project? That we don't have situations like I know we've had in the past where we have a DRI, we have a great study, we have a project accepted, and then in the end, the improvements don't get done. And the citizens who are for or against the project get frustrated and don't believe the next person that comes up here and asking for it because they don't think the actual DRI gets done. Are there conditions in there that would to make sure that occurs?
Yes, good question. There was in the previous meetings with the neighbors and the city residents, there were some questions about previous projects that had been approved, and there were recommendations to do improvements that didn't show up as a condition in the Greta conditions and the DRI conditions. And so while they were recommended in the study, they ended up not getting built. And what's different about this project, and for this project, Greta didn't recommend or condition every recommendation that we had. So I'll repeat that because I kind of messed it up. Greta did not condition every recommendation we had in the traffic study. However, in the zoning conditions, those recommendations are conditions. And so what's different is that the city has built them into the conditions. The 36 or so conditions include all of the transportation improvements.
Yeah, and if I could add to that real quick, again, Greta came up with mainly 4 conditions. The traffic study came out with a lot more, like Rob had mentioned. Those have all been added and also tied into a phasing that was shared by Jessica, as she showed you, phase 1 through 4. So again, a lot of the work along Dresden, you could say even the northern portion of Apple Valley, is tied with phase 1. Then you got the other conditions that are tied with the earlier of phase 2 or 3. So it's all built in per the conditions, but of course it's predicated on the development moving forward.
If I could just add a little bit of transparency to that, while we all recognize discussions on incentives for the project is a separate matter, and those discussions are ongoing, the environment or the totality of those incentives on the table have expanded with the conditions. So while the issues are separate, the processes, the additional traffic, which was not required for the DRA study, but was a condition, have essentially been added to the incentive request. So while these two processes are not legally connected, they've become extremely politically connected and definitely financially connected. And that's just something we have to work through.
Lindley?
Well, let me ask you this, and I'm not going to use acronyms because not everyone here is a traffic engineer. Isn't it critical with any development of regional impact that the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority's recommendations are in fact implemented?
Oh, they have to be. That's a condition from with the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority, their conditions have to be constructed prior to build out of the project.
And isn't it also fair to say that they have to be because they determine the long-term future of an entire traffic corridor when you're talking about a development of regional impact, such that if they weren't implemented, it would have long-term ramifications in addition to simply being a condition. It is absolutely necessary to the future functioning of that area's traffic.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
If that's the case, why do we hear the stories all the time of DRIs coming and going and developments coming up into the ground, yet the traffic improvements don't occur through one? What's the function of that?
Without knowing the specific projects, I could speculate that one, either it wasn't a condition by Greta, just like in this case, Greta didn't condition every recommendation that was in the traffic study. So maybe there were improvements that could have been done or were considered but weren't conditioned. Then there's also cases where a project is proposed. This happened a lot prior to the recession that we had in the late 2000s, where a very aggressive project was proposed with incredible density, had conditions placed on that project. Then after the recession, it comes back as a smaller, different project. Then in that case, it can be reconsidered in the DRI process, and the conditions can change.
For the viewing public, and maybe for my own clarification, we're using the word condition on really two types of traffic items. There's the DRI condition, which is required by the state. Subsequent on overlaying that are the traffic conditions that the Planning Commission added, which are not required on the DRI. So there's really kind of two types of conditions here. Enforcement on the state-required ones is relatively easy because GDOT's not going to let you off the hook. It's up to the local government to enforce the second layer, which are the ones that went above and beyond the DRI, which were required by the Planning Commission. Hope I didn't make it more muddied.
Well, ultimately, it's up to the local government to make sure that the Greta conditions are met also, right?
Yes, and that's why it's been worked into our overall zoning conditions for this development, the DRI conditions, in addition to, on top of that, the sort of the improvements that were represented in the traffic study. Those are all have been added together as a unified, comprehensive list of conditions. Again, the 36 that we're presenting to you.
I would think we all would agree on the stats that when we have these conditions or recommendations, it's here in Brookhaven that we actually get these things done and don't just let them set by the wayside and go, because again, it becomes a period of consternation for the residents and local officials, our officials after us that come in and say, well, this was supposed to be done way back when and wasn't done. It becomes a real headache for everyone and creates the distrust that permeates this whole process.
So the question there, remind me, there was a traffic update that was done recently that took into consideration some changes. I don't know if that was done for the Planning Commission or if it was done just at citizen request, but help me understand what that was. Sure. And then if that update, was that ever transmitted to Greta for DRI review as an update?
So in the initial Planning Commission meeting, there were concerns raised by residents, and you saw some of them tonight, and that were oriented to the operation of Apple Valley. Mm-hmm. And so when we do the study, when we do our traffic study, we do these projections and we make recommendations to improve the intersections. What that does is it creates additional capacity at these intersections. Mm-hmm. What we don't do is go back and reassign the world of traffic. And a lot of people do that, right? A lot of people go and they'll adjust their travel pattern to, like, one of the things we heard over and over again were people that drive up North Druid Hills, they turn onto Apple Valley, and use Apple Valley to get to Dresden to go north on Peachtree. And they avoid the Druid Hills at Peachtree intersection entirely. And so what we saw was, and what was shown was a concern for a long queue of traffic that would be going northbound on Apple Valley, turning left on Dresden to go north on Peachtree. Sorry. And so that, in our study, we made the recommendations at Peachtree and Dresden and Peachtree and North Druid Hills, and the intersection at Apple Valley and Dresden still worked at an acceptable level of service overall. So we didn't go back and reassign all that traffic. Mm-hmm. And so it showed a long queue on Apple Valley. And so that was a concern. And so we worked with one of the residents who happens to be an engineer who pointed out this concern. And what we found was, we don't necessarily make every intersection work the absolute best it can when we do our analysis. So there's still room for tweaking timing and the offsets for coordination and synchronizing the signals. So there was a little bit of that we did. And we also looked and said, hey, we just generated all this capacity at North Druid Hills and Peachtree and at Dresden and Peachtree. It's going to be a lot easier for people to go that way and go up on Peachtree, and they don't have to avoid those intersections by going up Apple Valley. So we're going to take some of that, not all of it, but we're going to take some of that and put it back where they really want to go. And what that showed was that there's not going to be that queue on Apple Valley at Dresden. And so that's what was in that memo, mm-hmm. and explaining all that methodology and how the assumptions we made, mm-hmm. trying to be conservative, and so walked through that process. That was not an issue in the DRI process. The DRI had been approved prior to that, so it was not shared because it had already been approved.
One question for staff, and I'm not sure if there are any other traffic questions, but it deals with traffic. We are somewhere in the process of looking at a traffic study for the Peachtree Road, Dresden, North Druid Hills corridor. Can you give me any update on where that is and expected completion date for the city's sort of site-specific study on the traffic solutions for Peachtree, North Druid Hills, Dresden?
Going to have to chime in and just ask you to make sure you include Peachtree, North Druid Hills down to 85 corridor too, because that's going to be impacted by this.
Right.
Give me a moment, let me pull up the last update on that.
While you're looking for that,
But-
do you mind if I ask a quick question?
Before
Well, from a scope standpoint, Megan, while he's looking it up, the study deals specifically from a pedestrian perspective, one part of the study from North Druid Hills to, I believe, Ashford Dunwoody.
Right.
And then there is a comprehensive traffic study for the complete length of Peachtree Road.
Right.
It does not include North Druid Hills, which is needed, but it's just not in the scope.
Is that a GDOT program, or is that a Brookhaven?
It's our consulting study, and it's partially funded through the ARC.
All right.
Yeah, it's an LCI study.
Yeah.
Prospect of improvements to the streetscape.
Yeah.
Hey, John.
So
John.
So going back to the concern that was raised, I just want to make sure I understand this. So if you were to take current flows of cut-through traffic and go through Apple Valley, from North Druid Hills to Apple Valley to Dresden to Peachtree, and add to that the incoming and outgoing ingress and egress from the MARTA site, I think the word bandied about is catastrophic in terms of what would happen there. Would that be a fair assessment?
Folks.
With that applause, I'm going to have to ask you to ask that again. I want to make sure I hear that correctly.
So the assumption is that the cut-through traffic that would go through on Apple Valley to Dresden Peachtree In addition to that, the ingress and egress from the MARTA property would cause a lot of spillback, and so the question then is, you made an assumption that if the intersection at Druid Hills and Peachtree were made, then that would take some of that load off.
Right.
And you said, and it's, to be fair, you said you're not taking all of the credit for it, but you're doing that. But that's based on an assumption.
Correct.
And so if that assumption were not to hold, how bad, do you have any sense of how bad that intersection would be?
So what would happen is the left turn lane that turns from Apple Valley to Dresden, that northbound left turn lane, if nobody adjusts what they do, if nobody changes, that would back up through the first driveway serving the site. And is it Fernwood?
Fernwood Circle.
It's Peachtree View across the street. So that left turn queue would back up across that intersection. I wouldn't describe that as catastrophic. And the reason is the property has multiple points of access. It can prohibit and limit the amount of traffic that can turn from the side streets. But there are alternatives to that intersection for both sides of the street.
But it would actively affect those in the local neighborhood as well as the MARTA development.
Sure. But again, we don't expect that to happen because we can improve the timing at the intersections, and we don't expect 300 people to turn right onto Apple Valley to then go turn left on Dresden after these improvements.
All right.
I don't have any more questions.
Well, Lindley, do you have anything right now? Okay. Continue. Bates, right? Or Joe?
No, I'm done.
Okay, Bates.
The study for the Peachtree corridor, from what I understand, is a 5 to 20-year study.
Looking out 5 to 20 years.
Looking out, and we're early in that process of doing that study. I'm trying to find a specific update, the most recent update that we received, and that's what I'm currently looking for. But it's my understanding we're pretty early in the process right now.
Yeah, so my hope had been that we would have gotten this one as a city completed so that we could have our own study to really look at the long-term plans. It's nice that we've had significant studies on this site and all of the intersections around the MARTA station, but as a city, we need to have long-term solutions for this area because these problems are not going to go away, and we know from the some of the public statements about the growth that we're going to see in Metro Atlanta. I'd like to make a motion if I can go ahead and do so.
I have one real quick, because we've talked a lot about like citizen review board, architectural review board. It's been bandied about. I have a question for Chris. How would we do that, and timing-wise, how do we would be able to enforce that on this project?
Well, the cleanest way to force it on this project is have it in place before the zoning is done. I mean, that's the absolute best practice means. That way there's no question, no debate, no litigation about whether the Architectural Review Board would apply to future permitting or not, because it pre-existed the grant of a zoning ordinance. There are arguments to be made, and there are arguments that can be made with an absolute straight face that you don't have to do that as long as the Architectural Review Board is in place before the permit application is filed. But I can't say to you with absolute certainty that some judge somewhere is going to buy those arguments. The only way to absolutely make sure that it applies in advance is to have it in place before the zoning.
Yep. Thank you. Bates, you want to make a motion?
Yeah. I move that we defer RZ 16-08 for the MARTA TOD and SLUP 16-02 to the January 24th council meeting, January 24th, 2017. It's about 90 days from now.
I second.
In discussion, I would first like to say that I appreciate all the citizens' time. I know that tonight you've been here over 2 hours. Asking for a deferral means you're going to have to come back, and this is unresolved, and it's going to continue to create angst in your lives. And I apologize for that. But this is a very serious consideration which the city needs to get right. It is a long-term, I'd say it's a 100-year decision, not just a 50-year decision. I also want to commend the applicant, MARTA, for going so far above and beyond in outreach to our community. When we started this process, it was before the creation of the city of Brookhaven. This was a community group that said, how do we plan out our vision for Brookhaven for the next 20, 25 years, 50 years? And that's what led to the LCI study, creation of the overlay, and then the city has picked that up and had its own studies in the overlay and upheld those laws that we carried over from DeKalb County. But MARTA and this developer, but first going back to MARTA in 2013 when they held their own charrettes to update basically what do you as citizens want to see for this area. Because many people had clamored about the fact that, look, I never knew about the overlay. I didn't get to participate in those conversations. I don't like this overlay. It doesn't make sense to me. Why are we creating density? This process where MARTA brought that back to the table allowed a whole nother set of input from our public to weigh in and say what they wanted to see as their vision for the future. It does require education of the public because there are a lot of engineers who do all of these studies on what we are going to have in the future and how to best impact the urbanization of this area. We all see as citizens all the problems that word cloud showed. Traffic, number one. The existing traffic conditions are unbearable. It is the number one thing that I hear when I go to the grocery store or I'm on the streets and talking to citizens of Brookhaven is the traffic. So how can we consider a project when we're dealing with the existing traffic conditions that we currently that we currently experience? The reality is we as a council have to be forward-looking and we have to plan for the future. Creating smart development around transit nodes is an important way that this city is going to grow. We have to look at transportation alternatives, and MARTA is a very vital part of that. But to get back to my point, because I don't want to go on too long about this, I do want to commend the applicant. I want to continue this dialogue because I think that that the applicant has come a long way from where we started in those charrettes. We have seen the changes. But there are some major details that we need to try and solve before this January 14th date. Number one, I would say, is this stormwater issue. I very much feel that if we can find a way to create a stormwater retention on site, then we activate Fernwood Park as a long linear park that can be really planned out more appropriately and not just be a 1 acre fenced-in stormwater thing. I do believe that the continued conversation with the library are very important for us to have so that we can further continue that park and really create it as a comprehensive three-party solution, library, city, and MARTA. We saw from one of the slides up there that the citizens have certainly spoken loud and clear in those MARTA charrettes that the library was a very important thing to see in this city center. I know that you're dealing with a party that's not here at this table, but I'd like to see another stab at bringing them into the table and having a serious discussion about where's that MARTA going to go, because it sure would be nice to have it planned out in this linear park and planned at the same time that we're dealing with this. The other issues that the mayor alluded to is that really the origins of the CRB were intended to address this issue of continued dialogue between the developer and our citizens about the details. The things post-zoning that have to be discussed and when things pop up, you need a citizen sounding board to be able to communicate, here's what's going on with the project. Because once zoning happens, the anxiety for our citizens do not stop. And the CRB was created by the city to be a representative group of all of the city of Brookhaven. It has, council, appointees or recommendations from every council member, appointees that were brought from all of the surrounding neighborhoods surrounding the Brookhaven MARTA station, and some of the other specialty groups like the BPCA and the Brookhaven Chamber of Commerce. But we've added to that group to be more inclusive, and I do believe that that's a very good thing. It is a group that is going to continue to be used as a dialogue between the developer and our citizens post-zoning. But ultimately, when we're talking about, particularly in the SLUP, I think the issue that we really have to hone in on is that our citizens want to make sure that this is a signature building that they feel proud of. The reality is, without the SLUP, you're at 8 stories. With the SLUP, you're at 8 stories. You're talking about a difference in the number of feet, and the difference is 100 to 125 feet. And if somebody can show me and point out what the difference is from street level, I would love to see that happen, because the reality is you're not going to see that difference really from the street level on a scale. But the people want the ability to weigh in on that decision, and it's really important for us. As we've grown as a city, I've seen the increasing need to create an architectural review board. And I think that that's an important thing that we can bring to the table within this period of time to be able to talk about with the developer, but it has a much more broad policy discussion that the city needs to have about how we activate this board and utilize them to make sure that the decisions that are made to make this a signature project and in future buildings that are being built in Brookhaven, that we have the quality that our citizens expect in Brookhaven. That's all my 2 cents on that. But I do believe that through this 90 days that we can have a continued dialogue and address some very specific issues. Stormwater, architectural review board on the city. I hope that we can continue the dialogue with our traffic study plan so that we as a city can have at least some more input, even though we might not have a finalized plan. We can have a position on this issue. And also the abatement issue. This is a discussion that I believe should be, a part of this dialogue, because it addresses how we're actually paying for the things that the public needs to know are going to be created. And we can condition it all day long. We can say we're going to make all these traffic improvements to Peachtree Road, and we're going to do Fernwood Park, or we're going to do the stormwater issue internally so that you can build out a active stream. But if it comes around full circle and it says, well, yeah, but you're going to have to pay for that, the entirety of all of those benefits just through the tax abatements. Well, okay, well, we're paying for it already. Now there's a dialogue that needs to happen about, yes, does the tax revenue of this development provide that mechanism for being able to fund those developments? Yes, potentially. But that dialogue also needs to be activated, and I think that this next 90 days is important for the developer, MARTA, and the city to not run into the same problem that we've seen in other parts of DeKalb County, where all of a sudden we get a city who tries to ramrod an inducement down the throats of the county and the school board, both of which have play an important role in our city. And I do not want to see us get to the point where we have kept them out of that dialogue. With continued dialogue, we can solve that, and we can all get on board with the fact that this has the potential to be a really great development, and I hope that we get there by January 24th. Thanks.
Thank you. Joe?
I'd like to start out by first thanking you folks, our residents, for your input. It's been fantastic. We appreciate it on council. We're here to represent you, and it's important that we hear what you have to say. Send it. We read it. I read it, and I'm sure every one of my other council members read theirs. Your presentations were very professional. You're engaged. We have a very engaged community. Thank God for that. We're blessed with that. Also want to thank Amanda, Jessica, you folks at MARTA. You have done a very, very good job. I think we're getting close. I do want to say that I am in favor of MARTA development. We need that here in the city. It's just a matter of what it's going to be and how it's going to be, and we're getting closer. Now, out of respect for all of the work that's been done by everybody in this room, I wanted to do a prepared statement to try and make sure that we, to review what are the top issues that we're talking about here, and help ensure that when we do a 90-day deferral, MARTA knows what it is that we're looking for. So it's not just 90 days, we're looking for certain things. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and hopefully it'll clarify, and my council members will agree. The issue before council today, the rezoning of the MARTA TOD, or transit-oriented development, is a much greater scope than the typical technical rezoning decisions that we are asked to make here on a regular basis. We are talking about Brookhaven's front door, the city's only transit center, and the convergence of 3 of the city's busiest streets. We find ourselves here today after literally years of preparation, and as Jessica pointed out, it's been 10 years, much longer than the city. Years of preparation, analysis, studies, public participation, media coverage. As a city council, we wholeheartedly support this transparency and engagement. We also know this type of project inherently brings out the passions of interested parties on both sides of the issue. Caring, engaging citizens want to know how this project is going to impact them. We have heard from you. Many have worked hard to educate themselves on the issues at hand, including traffic engineering, watershed management, urban planning, sewer systems, economic development, and abatements, among other issues. There are complex, interrelated issues, and the City Council has the obligations to weigh the opinions of many along with the analysis of experts. We are not experts on these topics, but neither was the Planning Commission. They heard from the experts and the citizens, and the result was the issuance of 36 conditions imposed on this project. The primary influence was by far the input from our citizens. Today's decision is a zoning issue, and to be clear, most of the technical aspects have been largely resolved. But I also believe it is an accurate statement to say that I and my fellow colleagues still have remaining concerns over 3 key issues. Number 1, stormwater retention. Number 2, mechanisms for architectural review board. And 3, the issue of potential incentives tied directly to rezoning conditions. Since the Planning Commission's deliberations, we have been inundated with questions about stormwater impact on Fernwood Detention Basin, Fernwood Park, and downstream flooding. I would like to see staff work with the developer to determine the impact and costs of on-site stormwater detention to address these concerns. Perhaps on-site detention would free up the existing Fernwood Detention Basin to be more of a green space than what is currently envisioned. Protection and enhancement of green space is a consistent theme of this council. This council has supported as we continue to think about impact of our decisions on future generations. For these reasons, I believe the rezoning decision should be delayed for a minimum of 90 days to allow analysis of the resolution of these issues. Another concern we have heard is the need for citizen input on the design of the project. I think it is the direction of council to establish an architectural review board for the purpose of providing guidance to council on this very important project as well as future projects of this magnitude. The structure and authority of this architectural review board should be established prior to the rezoning decision. Note, I am not asking that the design be finalized, only that the review mechanism be defined and implemented. The vision is that the actual design approval needs to be part of the permitting process. This is in the best long-term interest of our great city. Sewer capacity is the next issue, and is not likely, and it is not simply an issue just for the developer and the development, but also for strategic future of DeKalb County. For the folks present in this chamber tonight, and for the folks watching on these proceedings at home, it is important for you to know that the decision on sewer capacity is not a zoning question, but a permitting question. We have mentioned that several times tonight. However, knowing who will pay for sewer enhancements is particularly germane to this rezoning request because if the city refuses to pay for the sewer work, and DeKalb County refuses to pay for the sewer works, and MARTA refuses to pay for the sewer work, and the developer refuses to pay for the sewer work, well, then there is no project, and therefore no need to rush for a rezoning decision. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the developer has sought public financing of what has been described as site amenities, totaling first $17 million, then approximately $22 million, and now $26 million. While a discussion, analysis, and debate over incentives is not, and I repeat not, a part of the rezoning decision, the developer has included in the public funding of site amenities the specific costs of various rezoning conditions. These include road improvements. Once again, if the city refuses to pay for these road improvements, and if MARTA refuses to pay for these road improvements, and if the developer refuses to pay for these road improvements, well, then the question remains, do we have a viable project? This, once again, leads us to the inevitable question, is there really a need for a rush for a zoning decision today? Now, the single largest site amenity the development team is seeking is public funding for an $8.4 million MARTA parking deck to replace the surface parking. It is my clear understanding that the city administration has, on more than one occasion, told the development team and MARTA that the city is not funding this parking deck, even after considering the new property tax revenues from this project. Similar to the sewers, if the city is not paying for the parking deck, and if the developer is not paying for the parking deck, and if MARTA is not paying for the parking deck, we are back to the question of whether or not we have a viable project, supporting, once again, our valid reason for not rushing into a decision. So where does this leave us? I believe it is in Council's best interest and in the best interest of Brookhaven that we give the development team, with assistance from our staff, additional time to resolve the following issues. 1, determine the impact and cost of on-site stormwater retention. Emphasis should be on providing a more park-like setting for the Fernwood Detention Basin. 2, what is the true cost of sewer work and who will pay for it? 3, what will be the structure and makeup of the Architectural Review Board? The immediate challenge to Council will be developing the necessary resolution, appointing members, and establishing the process. 4, what will the city of Brookhaven be willing to support for incentives, if any, for this project? If provided, it will definitely not be $26 million. The Brookhaven Development Authority needs to complete a line item review for each request seeking public funding, especially those items linked to rezoning conditions. In addition, our Development Authority must work with colleagues from the DeKalb County School District and the DeKalb County government to discern their level of participation. It is inappropriate for the development team, or for the city for that matter, to assume that the Brookhaven Development Authority will unilaterally give away future tax revenue that supports education of our children and funds for county operations. So after many years of hard work, it is recommended that we defer for 90 days this rezoning and SLUP until the areas mentioned are addressed.
Lindley?
My microphone is the one that makes noise. Okay.
Want to use that other one?
That's all right. I moved
Okay.
it away. I think it's okay now. I want to thank y'all all for being here this evening very much. We are so blessed to have such an active citizenry, and we appreciate you, all of you, with MARTA, with this proposal. You know, zoning decisions are legal decisions made by City Council, and there are legal criteria that apply to these decisions. And we can't make them willy-nilly. Now, I know that traffic is the #1 concern. We've certainly heard that loud and clear, and it's a major concern for us as well, I assure you. I am very glad to see that we have a DRI traffic study that has designated very specific projects to mitigate traffic that would result from this rezoning. You know, we heard tonight that the DRI recommendations are critical to the future functioning of the roads in the entire area. And I will commit to you that I will work to ensure that if a rezoning is passed for this project in the future, that the DRI recommendations are indeed followed, and that the road improvements that have been recommended do indeed come to pass. But again, legally, zoning decisions should not be based primarily on traffic concerns, because if that were the case, all upzonings, all rezonings, that is, an increased density, would be denied on that basis. They almost by definition increase traffic. And so what I consider our job as City Council to be is to do what we must do by DRI study or otherwise to mitigate traffic concerns. On another note, I have appreciated very much what we have observed as the give and take between the developer and the community here with regard to this development. We saw slides of the adjustments that have been made and so forth. But I'm afraid that that things have gotten so busy negotiating the uses and the densities on this property that perhaps it's not there architecturally. Now, I know, again, that, architecture is not a legal basis for a rezoning decision, but I would, since I have your ear right now, just like to say that this is our city center, and we'd really love a project of distinction at our city center. And I don't think that's what we're seeing. I don't think that what's been presented is distinctive. And I think that the city center of Brookhaven deserves something more distinctive architecturally, and deserves really world-class architecture. And I'd like to see things move in that direction during this deferral period if, in fact, we pass this evening. An architectural review board can, of course, play an important role in that, and I think that's a good direction for us to go in. The remaining issues, however, that I have and that y'all have brought to me that I understand are indeed of legal importance, urban planning, watershed management, and so forth that we've talked about this evening. We all understand that this is a very important decision, and I want you all to know that everyone on City Council has taken this very seriously, and we have all dedicated ourselves to educating ourselves and trying to make the best decision we possibly can for this community. None of us have taken it lightly, but I do feel that we need just a bit more time to do it right.
John?
I'm lucky to have very well-spoken colleagues with a lot of good points. I have nothing of real value to add. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I suspect I probably won't have a vote on this today. But again, kind of reiterate, thanking the community, thanking MARTA, its team, and the continued work that we're going to do. I really do want a project that is right, not necessarily right now, tonight. So with that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I may interject. When the motion was made, it was not specified as to which case, and we do have to make two separate motions for the rezoning as well as the SLUP, and if you could just at least mention the case number.
Yeah, so I thought I did. I'll do it to be sure. You want to just restate the motion and
Yeah, if you could start off with the RZ 1608 and restate your motion, please.
Yeah, so I recommend that we defer case RZ 16-08, the MARTA TOD, and SLUP 1602, the MARTA TOD, to the January 24th City Council meeting. That work?
That works fine, thank you.
And seconded
My second holds.
by Joe.
Chris,
Chris, are we kosher?
Yes, sir.
Susan?
Okay. Now, with that, all in favor of the deferral, please say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. It's deferred. Well, we'll do a 5-minute break.
Yes, sir.
Let's stretch the legs right now.
I'm not sure that there's an easement granted across the roadway to get to the They've not provided any documents, there's nothing on record. Yes, sir. The only place that the easement would be make viable is if there's any purpose to the easement, and it's not So it wasn't That's an additional lane
Oh,